Well, here's something some of you might not have expected. Rumors are suggesting that Nvidia is going to be unveiling their entire RTX 50 series video cards in Q1 of 2025. This means we should see cards like the RTX 5070 and 5060, which target the mid-range and mainstream markets, sooner than anticipated. While I'm sure this will sound like great news to some of you, I gotta admit it's still rather perplexing and makes me wonder why Nvidia is breaking away from its usual release traditions. Let's discuss that in this video.
Hey, if you enjoy content like this, drop a like, make sure to subscribe, and smash that bell so you never miss another video.
Hey, what is going on, guys? Danny here. Welcome back to the channel, and I hope you've all been doing well. There's new information, or should I say rumors, coming out from the board channel's forums suggesting how Nvidia is going to be releasing all of their RTX 50 series GPUs in the first quarter of 2025. This isn't the typical behavior we've come to expect from Nvidia, as whenever they release a new generation, product releases within that generation are scattered throughout the year, rather than releasing all of their products in a single quarter. There could be various reasons why Nvidia could be taking this approach, but before that, let's take a look at the actual info itself, and then we'll discuss. So here it says the latest news is that the release time of Nvidia's RTX 50 series is basically determined. This time, the various models of the RTX 50 series may be released relatively quickly, basically released monthly. It is understood that the more accurate release time points are disclosed as follows. Nvidia has determined that the approximate release time for the RTX 50 series. The 5090 and 5080 series will be released at CES in January 2025. The RTX 5070 Ti and 5070 series will be released in February, and the RTX 5060 Ti and 5060 series will be released in March. So all of them will be released within the first quarter of 2025. There is no product plan for Super Series models for the time being. Now, again, this is a translation, so the wording was probably a little off, but I'm sure you guys get the gist of it. Now, Nvidia has always done something a little bit different with every new generation release. With the 40 series, we had the 4090 and 4080, and then they were trying to release the 4080 12GB, which then got unlaunched and then rebadged as the 4070 Ti. Before that, with the 30 series, we have the 3090, which was the first introduction of the 90 class, and then we had the 3080 and 3070 announced all together, and then the 60 class followed a few months later. When the 20 series came out, we had the 2080 Ti, 2080, and then 2070, with the 60 class coming a few months after that. But with the 50 series, it seems like each class will be launched or released in sequence 1 month after the other. The first thing that came to mind as to why they were doing this is because Nvidia is concerned about some of the competition in the mid-range market. As many of you will know, since AMD isn't going to be competing in the high-end segment, they will be going after the mid-range and mainstream segments. If AMD is able to deliver an RX 8700 XT that's priced at like $350 or $400 and delivers 4070 Ti levels of performance, I can see there being a lot of attention towards them. Furthermore, we also have Intel with Battlemage, who will also be competing in those segments as well. Now, with Battlemage, I am personally a lot more uncertain about where it's going to land in terms of performance, because we barely have any information out there, and it's somewhat hard to speculate based on their initial ARC series, which was riddled with driver problems and held back due to that. But if there's anyone who knows more about what Intel's up to with Battlemage, it's definitely Nvidia. But let's not forget Nvidia's approach when it comes to their competitive edge. They're not just sitting around waiting to see what AMD or Intel does. Nvidia has been a dominant player in the high-end and mid-range market for years, and even if they think there's a slight chance of losing ground to AMD's RX 8000 series or Intel's Battlemage, I wouldn't be surprised if they're speeding up their product launches to ensure they stay ahead of the curve. It happened with the 10 series before. Nvidia didn't quite anticipate that AMD's RX 480 would turn out to be so good and that they'd launch it at such an aggressive price point. So from what I had heard, it actually freaked Nvidia out a bit, and hence we saw the 1060 release shortly after. The mid-range and mainstream market segments are where the bulk of the sales happen, and that's where most gamers spend their money. Nvidia knows this, and while the RTX 4090 and 4080 got the spotlight for the 40 series launch, it's the 4070 and 4060 that actually move units. If you take a look at the Steam hardware surveys, you'll see that the 4060 series and 4070 series are some of the most popular GPUs amongst them. And that happened despite a lot of negative attention and feedback from the press and community. A quick release of the RTX 50 series stack from the high-end down to mainstream could be Nvidia's way of locking in that market share before AMD and Intel even have a chance to sway consumers with their new offerings. I recognize that in the past we've talked and discussed how Nvidia doesn't really recognize their competition in the space or care about them anymore, but I feel like to some degree they still are watching competition, and if they feel like their monopolized kingdom they've established is under any ounce of threat at all, they'll take action and put a lid on it. They don't act complacent, that's for sure. Nvidia also probably wants to consolidate their marketing efforts. By launching the whole stack in Q1 2025, they can hit the ground running with a unified message that this is the RTX 50 series and it's here to dominate 2025. There's no drawn out release schedule, no months of speculation about when the next card is coming out. Instead, it's all on the table at once, and that allows Nvidia to focus their market on the series as a whole rather than piecemeal launches spread out throughout the year and then, them restarting that cycle of people saying, oh, it's too expensive, and then now we have to look forward to this card and that turns out to be expensive. It's all going to be done with right at the start. Second, Nvidia isn't going to be hard constrained by supply issues as they were in the past with the RTX 20 or 30 series. If we look back, the RTX 20 series launched just after the 2017-2018 crypto mining boom, which massively inflated GPU demand. Then the RTX 30 series came out during the pandemic, a time when global supply chains were completely disrupted due to factory shutdowns, shipping delays, and silicon shortages. Not to mention, we had yet another crypto mining boom that drove demand through the roof, pushing prices to insane levels for consumers. It was a perfect storm of events that left Nvidia grappling with availability issues. Now, with the RTX 40 series, things had started to settle down a bit, lockdowns were lifted, and mining had largely died off. But even then, we were still dealing with the lingering effects of the previous chaos. Supply chains were still trying to stabilize, and then there were delays in logistics. You guys remember how hard it was to find an RTX 4090 at the beginning? And just when we thought things might normalize, a new factor emerged: AI. The explosion in AI workloads put a fresh kind of demand on GPUs we hadn't seen before, particularly in the data center space, which once again made supply tighter than it should have been. However, I don't see Nvidia facing the same kind of headwinds with the 50 series this time around. The market conditions are different, crypto isn't the major disruptor it once was, the pandemic-related delays are largely in the rearview mirror, and AI demand is in a more predictable and somewhat separate sector from the gaming space. Nvidia has already had a clear roadmap for separating its gaming and AI lines. GPUs for AI and HPC workloads like the B100, B200, and H100 are serving that need, leaving the GeForce lineup to focus on gaming. This makes me skeptical of the idea that Nvidia is rushing the entire 50 series launch to get ahead of some looming supply issue. Unlike the past, I don't think Nvidia is as vulnerable to supply chain hiccups or sudden surges in demand. If anything, they seem better prepared for it this time around. We'll circle back to that, but I just wanted to shift away and briefly talk about expected performance for the 70 class and 60 class. I've seen speculations and rumors that are just all over the place, and right now the information pertaining to those cards is still very limited. Over the past few weeks, we saw more details leaked by Kopite7Kimi on Twitter for the 5090 and 5080, which I went over, and what I'll say is that given the lackluster improvement we're seeing for the 80 class this generation, it really doesn't make me feel optimistic about the 70 class and 60 class, as traditionally Nvidia has always given you less chocolate as you go down the stack, and with each progressive generation, it's been getting worse. Typically, the 80 class has always beaten the previous generation flagship by a sizable margin, but with the 5080 and given its specs, we might even see it lose to the 4090, which would be quite astounding. So then that begs the question, where does the 5070 and 5060 land? Are we going to see the 5070 at best matching the 4070 Ti and then sell for $700 or $800, and then a 5060 Ti providing performance that trails behind the vanilla 4070 with a 8GB memory buffer on a 128-bit bus in 2025 for $500? In no way does that improve the market, as it just results in stagnation, or in some cases, it's regression. There was a Twitter thread further discussing the leaked specs, and in a reply to that thread, Kopite stated that the 5070 will come with 12GB, which isn't surprising to hear at this point, considering they mentioned that the 5080 still has 16GB on a 256-bit bus, and we know Nvidia doesn't ever want the 5070 and 5080 being in the same realm, not after what happened with the 900 series. When it comes to hardware, the ship has sailed, and this goes back to what I had discussed recently in a previous video of mine, where we aren't really being sold on the hardware anymore, and what we're being sold is software. Nvidia stated recently how they cannot do computer graphics anymore without AI. DLSS was a game changer for Nvidia, and there's no doubt that the focal point of the series will be DLSS 4.0, and that will incorporate some new features or aspects to mitigate the lower performance improvements. When the 4070 was originally launched, I recall Nvidia showing performance being higher than the 3090 because the former had frame generation while the older generation did not. And I don't agree with Nvidia calling frame generation a performance booster, but that's the way they had sold it and marketed as. So whatever way DLSS 4.0 helps to showcase better performance on the 50 series, they will be marketing that as its advantages. They did do that last gen. Just take a look at the 4060 trailer. They show the 4060 Ti is almost double the performance. That's really not true because the former doesn't support frame generation. This is why they can justify those lackluster specs on the 5080 and those rumors suggesting it's 10% faster than the 4090. Well, that could have originated from a special AI workload where the Blackwell architecture specifically excels at, maybe due to having an accelerator that Lovelace does not. And circling back to AMD, even if they are faster in raw rasterization, it doesn't matter anymore. Along with that, even if they finally catch up with them in terms of ray tracing performance or upscaling, Nvidia will have already moved on to the next big AI powered feature that hasn't been seen before that AMD will be lacking and thus drive people over to Team Green. The 4060 outsold both the 7700 XT and 7800 XT by a wide margin. In fact, neither of those mid-range RDNA 3 GPUs are even on the Steam hardware surveys as their own category yet, which is kind of crazy. But we also can't rule out the possibility of AMD coming to that realization and hopefully rolling out a special AI feature of their own that RDNA 4 could excel at. The same goes for Intel, who in many ways did actually give Nvidia a run for their money when it came to upscaling, and their ray tracing performance out of the gate was actually decent. If either of them end up delivering FPS per dollar and also came out with enticing features of their own, Nvidia is going to need to respond quickly. By having their entire RTX 50 series come out in Q1, they can counter whatever AMD throws at them. Intel, on the other hand, is still somewhat of a wild card, but with Battle Mage expected to hit the mid-range, Nvidia probably doesn't want to leave any gaps for them to exploit either. So to wrap things up, this new release strategy from Nvidia is definitely intriguing. By getting the RTX 50 series out early in 2025, Nvidia is likely trying to solidify its position in the market before AMD and Intel have a chance to gain ground. It's a smart move, but it's also one that comes with risks, especially if the RTX 50 series doesn't live up to the hype in terms of performance or value. Anyways, guys, that's going to be all that I have for you on this one. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Are you guys excited for the 50 series? Do you think Nvidia will price these cards aggressively, or are we looking at another round of higher prices and market regression? I'd love to hear what you guys think. Until then, we'll be touching base in the next video.
If you guys found this video to be informative and entertaining, then leave a like. Let me know your thoughts and comments down below. Be sure to check out the video description for cool links and ways to support the channel, such as using my Amazon affiliate link. And if you're interested in seeing more content like this, then consider subscribing. I'd greatly appreciate it. Thank you guys so much for watching, take care, and I'll see you in the next one.